So here we are again on our third, I think, food forest, continuing our journey from emergency to emergence, exploring, thriving, not just surviving, but thriving the polycrisis. Today, general theme is an intro into emergent ecological principles. And the overall idea or the overall aim is that we want to thread together new planetary stories. Obviously, the current ones are pretty clunky, hazardous, and seem to not work very well. The story of separation, anthropomorphism, the current scientific fragmentary vision of how we approach studying nature and relating with the natural world around us. And so the idea of ecological principles is elaborating emergent, observable kind of principles that we can look at and witness in nature all around us, in the biosphere itself, and then hopefully align our revolutionary impulses, the way we do labor, how we love, how we die, how we live, according to these principles of the biosphere that we emerged from. There are plenty of resources that I kind of picked throughout the years, and I'm going to put them in the resource in Discord. So whoever is watching it on any other social media and you're not on the Discord yet, join us. But what's really important in this, I think you can call a movement towards ecological living, is that it's a direct counter to how the capitalist social machine abstracts everything. Everything is an abstraction. Love is ideas of the one and romanticism. Labor, actual labor that is producing life, that is producing sustenance, is now just bullshit work. The idea of human in itself is an image of a human, when in actuality, human is a process. It's another creature among other creatures. There is no such thing as a self, as a separated self. So all of these things, all of these representations and signs and images that capital creates are very much abstracting life itself, the real. And so there is a movement here to coming back to the real, coming back to the immutable, directly observable, impossible to refute laws that we are governed by, not abstraction, not abstract arbitrary laws like judicial law, the law of the state, or all kinds of man-made laws, but the laws that of the cycles of Earth that actually govern us all, whether we want it or not. So that's the overall kind of idea. We're going to explore some of these principles today, or start to elaborate them. And the idea is not for me to, as some kind of a higher knowing teacher, is going to bestow this new system of thought upon you, but rather that we elaborate on them together. So I synthesize what I've learned so far. Everyone who came before me, the realization that we are part of an ancestral chain of wisdom, right? That we are connected to all of our human and non-human ancestors that have already been exploring this since we existed on this planet and before. And we are going to start elaborating them together. That's the point of this space, right? Like, I'm going to make some suggestions or things that I've observed or things that I've learned from different places. And then we can build on them together. So for example, next session that we have on the bonfire, we can come up together and people can share how these principles are being applied or being embodied or being experienced in their day-to-day life. I thought that would be something really beautiful to do together. Yeah. So that's what I want to explore today. I'm going to maybe speak for maybe 30, maybe 40 minutes. I'm going to lay out some meta overview of some of these principles that I've started elaborating and exploring and practicing in my own life. And then we can open the space, have a discussion about them. I'm sure you guys have your own principles that you've observed throughout your own unique entanglement and experiences with the biospheres around you, with the particular landscape that you embody and the particular ancestry that you come from, and all these kind of unique intensities that you are. So, yeah. How does that sound? Should we get going? Beautiful. That's honestly my favorite part in the whole yearly curriculum that we have here. And I think a lot of these principles are going to be repeated a million times from different angles and elaborated on in all kinds of different ways. And that's part of the beauty. We're not talking about replacing one story with another, replacing one belief system with another. It's rather a movement beyond belief systems. You know, we can all have different beliefs, different ideas, different ideals, different things that we value, but there are things that we cannot disagree on, which are the laws that govern the biosphere, you know? And that's kind of what I want to point out here. So we have the principle that I would like to start with, which kind of threads and flows through all of the other principles, which is, of course, the principle of entanglement. We live in a very individualistic culture, and we have this, you know, going back to our previous discussion on hell loops, we have this another hell loop that maybe we haven't elaborated exactly, but here's an example. We have a hell loop between individualism and universalism. There is a movement between how we are individualized, you know, under the capitalist social machine, for example. You are a unique person. There's nobody else like you. You are the best and the most whatever. It's a very like individualistically based uniqueness. And on the other side, there is universalism. On the other end of that hell loop, there is everything is the same. It's all one. It's all exactly the same. It's all made of the same stuff. And this whole thing is a complete illusion, which you can find sometimes. Yeah, you can find it in many different places, but so entanglement is elaborating something quite different that takes both of these into account. In the philosophy of Deleuze and Guattari, for example, it's called singularity. It's this something that encompasses both uniqueness as well as collectivity or connection or entanglement. It's something that elaborates not the momentary snapshots, but the process itself, the whole thing, the process as it is. Part of that process we are. And in that process, there is experience of momentary vantage points of consciousness that express some uniqueness. And they are unique. But it's a uniqueness it's a diversity in wholeness. As Mori Bookchin that we are reading every Tuesday now in the Ecology of Freedom is elaborating it. Diversity in wholeness, entanglement, how things are inherently interconnected, interdependent, entangled, not just in the biosphere, but everything that exists, which nothing can exist outside of the biosphere, obviously, but sometimes it seems like maybe, you know, industrial society, urban society is somehow separated from nature, but those function in the exact same way. We can see it all around us. We can see it how all struggles for liberation are connected. We can see how all oppression is connected. We can see how everything in every strata of creation is inherently connected. And that informs how also we think about how we go about revolutionary impulses, how we go about liberation, right? We not seek to destroy something as much as better understand it to elaborate different realities, elaborate different stories. We are not fighting Nazis or Zionists, although sometimes in practicality it does look like that. But we are deconstructing something a lot more machinic, a lot more process-like than a particular person or particular idea. There is no such thing as an ideology, as a cohesive thing, just like there is no such thing as a person, as a sense of self, as a cohesive thing. It is a soup of happening, machines plugged into other machines, creating other machines to infinity, a process that has no beginning and no end, right? And this is something that we can see in the biosphere itself. There is something that, okay, we're going to get to it in metabolism. So, entanglement, something to start elaborating. Of course, we can talk on each one of these principles for 5 hours. And as a professional yapper, I can do that without a problem. But I'm going to continue just to kind of go over the principles. So, there's another one that is kind of connected. They're all pretty much entangled with each other and morph into each other. But something that I thought would be cool to elaborate here is animism. And I'm specifically stating animism as an ecological principle and not as a belief, a religion, ideal systems, because it's not. There is an aspect of the realization that everything is alive and animated that is very material. It's an observable principle. When we witness things all around us, we can see how they are imbibed with aliveness, from something that's very easy to see, like a conscious human being, to any other biological creature around us, plants and bacteria, but also even rocks. I'm walking down next to the river and I'm seeing the rocks and how they are being shaped with the water. And we think about water as this like inanimate thing and the rocks as an inanimate thing, but there is a whole poetic dance that is happening there, how they are shaped, so much drama. Something that I like to say is that places are migratory too. Places are also nomadic. We think about a place, we think about a static location, but everything in the place and what it's made of, whether we are talking about place as memory, right? The smells, the sensations of a place, they are completely nomadic. They move through animated creatures, but also the very material kind of elements of the place itself, from the earth to the rocks to the oxygen and other elements that exist in the space. They are in constant movement. So animism is something that we really can observe and come into contact with as an ecological principle, not just as another way to another on kind of another belief system. Yeah. Another one really beautiful that's was recently started to be elaborated in our readings of in the ecology of freedom is spontaneity and playfulness. And we can contrast that with the logic and premises of discipline that is a prerequisite and an assumption in all hegemonic systems of power and domination, right? That's kind of the overall premise of why there is a need for a state, for an anthropomorphic ontology of the judicial system and all of these kind of systems of discipline, is that there is a need for discipline, right? The discipline is a thing. And I think if there is something that we learn from the ecology is that there is no need for any form of disciplinary power in order for things to thrive, right? Like a bee or a bacteria or a worm in the compost pile, or a leaf or a tree or a cloud. They don't need discipline to function, to move, to produce life, to create, to be part of the process of happening. I'm going to mute you. All right. And so spontaneity is something that is very much observable in the biosphere. Things don't have a strategy or a plan or a disciplinary movement that is linearly going towards something. It's a playful interaction that constantly, through the engagement, through the relational processes, new life is forming, new life is happening. And out of the kind of evolutionary trial and error, or what we see around us, the kind of connections that actually worked, there is a lot other that didn't, right? That something was trying to happen and it kind of fizzled out into something else. So, and that is very much part of the process. There is a playful interaction. There is a spontaneity. Things emerge spontaneously. There is a lot of elements of chance in that spontaneity. That is a particularly beloved one for me, as I feel like a lot of other principles that we're elaborating here could be sometimes a bit ambiguous. This one feels very close to home because I feel like throughout my life, part of my journey was moving from the disciplinarian hustle, infinite growth, eternal summer of the kind of logics of the socialist, of the capitalist machine, and really trying to, as a process, as a practice, not as a doctrine, to structure my life most spontaneously, to have no to-do lists and no structure and no the little amount of planning as possible. Even this call itself, like I wrote I spent maybe 10 minutes writing just like the overview, and I'm trying to allow and leave enough space for spontaneity, for whatever wants to emerge from the relational happenings themselves, right? There is just that much that I can know based on my own interaction with ideas and, you know, the screen that I'm writing them on. But then you guys come into the picture, and then there is like a whole new dynamics that are being created. And in that, new things want to spontaneously emerge. And I'm thinking in the same way about every day of my life and trying to be like, you know, prioritize and intentionally orient towards spontaneity over discipline. And I really, so far, came to a pretty strong realization that I don't think there is any need for any kind of discipline whatsoever. Whether we are talking about discipline as like a practice of, you know, of some sort, or we are talking about discipline in terms of knowledge. Either way, there is no need for a master and a disciple. There is no need for that dominative hierarchy. There is no need to force ourselves into any action, right? And we can have a whole conversation about it. Usually, I'm met with antagonism the first time that I'm saying there is no need for any form of discipline for human thriving. People are like, wait, but how would I become a virtuoso of music? Or why would I work out and take care of my body without discipline? We can talk about it, but yeah. Okay. The next one that we can elaborate on is collaboration, symbiosis, interdependence over competition. Of course, we're all familiar with the logic of competition. That is a very much the basis of the social machine that is all around us, that we are a product of. In the biosphere, nothing competes with anything else. Predator who eats a prey is also prey of another thing. There is no dominative hierarchy. There is collaboration. Whether that collaboration is conscious and intentional, like some species who are coming to each other's aid, or something that is just mechanical, that is just part of the whole entire process, doesn't make much of a difference, in my opinion. It's a process. And if we see it as a process, then you're part of the process. And so, yeah, how do we embody some of those in the way that we go about liberatory action, the way that we go about our labor, and the way that we structure our lives and move through them, the way that we love? I think that specifically the notion of competition has a lot. I mean, all of these principles, we can find them in every moment of our life, in the way that we love, make love, the way that we move, the way that we work. But I think the idea of competition really exists very strongly in our mating rituals. The idea of there is like one person who is perfect for you, and then there is a lot of ownership in the way that we love or perceive, erotic love. And yeah, we're going to do well, I think, to structure the way that we love and make love based on the biosphere that is around us. Yeah. We're going to have a whole or a bunch of food forests dedicated just for erotic love according to ecological principles, but getting ahead of myself. We have necessity over wanting, a wide boundary lens. I think we can observe that things in the biosphere don't take more than they need, including our earlier ancestors. For a vastly longer period of human history, Homo sapien history, our ancestors had very specific social codes of what to do with surplus. It wasn't always the case. I'm not elaborating some kind of noble savage kind of romanticization here. There was the Aztec Empire who eventually was destroyed because they consumed and extracted more than they needed. And there are other examples of that as well. But overall, we can see how in human societies, there is this both contrasting impulses, one to extract and one to move by necessity, take what's needed, and live in more reciprocal kind of cycles with the biosphere around us. And when we look at thriving ecosystems, which, by the way, is something else that is important to mention, right? Like, not all biospheres or ecosystems are necessarily thriving. The impulse to destroy and to extract exists in the biosphere itself before and unrelated to humans at all. A few billion years ago, there was a blue algae that took over this entire planet and completely annihilated all life here. We are not unique even in that. We are not outside of the flow of the ecological entanglement, even in our attempt and almost success in completely destroying life here. That impulse exists. So we are learning not just from ecology period, we are learning from biospheres that thrive, biospheres that work, biospheres that function. And those biospheres function on principles of reciprocity, of necessity over consumption for the sake of consumption, which is very much the logic and premise of the social system that we're in right now. And I think it's also something very beautiful to ask ourselves in our own life. What do I actually need? And what have I been organized to want, to desire? It's a very powerful and I think necessary questions to ask ourselves. Deleuze and Guattari explore that very beautifully in their work, how this machinic overview of reality, as we spoke about, is very much connected to desire. How desire is always there, always moving, always bubbling, like libidinal forces, desire, life force, whatever you want to call it. And those forces can be directed, and evidently in our current social structures, a lot of these desires are being directed towards violence, towards greed, towards consumption for the sake of itself, not for enjoyment and joy and pleasure. And so it's good questions to ask ourselves as we want to elaborate and generate different futures. What is the difference between necessity and between wanting? What do I actually need? And I think this is something worth elaborating on in a whole food forest in the future. And I think it's there in the curriculum. But how, as we move towards increasingly more precarious existence here with ecological collapse and the collapsing of empires and globalized system that they created, life is going to change quite a bit. I don't know if we are going to have access to all of this surplus in our own lifetime. And a lot of people are asking themselves, okay, like there is less job security, there is less this, less that. Like how do we go about it? And people are scared, rightfully so. And I think a very important question there to ask and something to remember is that really when it comes down to what is really necessary for a thriving life is not that much. It's far less than what we think we need right now. Really far less. We need shelter, we need food, we need clean water. We need community around us to be social and create joy together. That's it. And those things are very available, not very expensive, and very accessible when we are connected with land, right? Like the land provide all of these things. So just something to think about and elaborate it on. I live here now surrounded with communities of indigenous people, very, very, very modest, very close to earth, very kind of material societies who in Western standards live in poverty, but are thriving in every other respect because they have their food, their social needs, their shelter needs provided by the community, within the community, by the land that they are part of, that they have always been part of, that their ancestors lived on for thousands of years. And it's really humbling and beautiful to kind of observe and learn and come in contact with that. And it's a reminder, you know, I'm driving there every day and I'm seeing like the kind of houses that people live in and the kind of life that is being lived, and without romanticizing it, because of course there's a lot of oppression and a lot of all kinds of forces that work there that are hazardous, but just overall makes me reflect more about necessity versus wanting. Okay, next we have seasons and cycles over linear progression. This is connected also to the discipline and the kind of eternal summer of capital. This it's from the way that we see the world around us, the way that we write human histories and evolutionary history of this planet, of everything is moving linearly forward in a progression. But it's also how we structure our own lives, how we structure society. And there is something in the biosphere that calls us into seasons, cycles. Everything is coming back to itself and round and round and round and round. Seasons for blooming, there are seasons for decay, there are seasons for rain and seasons for sunshine. And there are all kinds of magnificent ways to align our lives with that kind of ontology. And of course, our collective's favorite, death, metamorphosis, change, continuity. It's part of the cycles, it's part of a lot of other principles, but nevertheless, like an immutable, ultimate truth of this planet. Death. Much to say, much that will be said, much that already have been said and elaborated here, but nevertheless should be mentioned here as in one of the leading principles. And then we have a bunch of other principles that I have yet to kind of elaborate fully or in the same full way that of these other ones. But nevertheless, I'm finding very interesting to contemplate, and I wanted to bring them here so we can maybe work them out together. So one is vulnerability and authenticity. It's something that you don't immediately think about when you think about a biosphere. It sounds like a kind of like a human realm type of thing. But in my work around sexual, erotic intimacy with people, I noticed a lot. And of course, as the ecological part kind of started connecting more and more to every aspect of it, I started asking myself, what kind of emergent principles I can learn from the biosphere that can help people relate? And one of them that I was thinking about is vulnerability and authenticity over the kind of social performance and the masks that we put on, that are, of course, part of the overall premise of abstraction that we spoke about at the beginning. How everything is an image of an image of an image, even ourselves. an image of something, an idea. When we say how we feel, right? If you notice, unless you've been really deep into nonviolent communication and all kinds of other authentic communication methods, we say I feel, and then the next thing is nothing even remotely close to a sensual feeling, and it's all about some kind of story that is being elaborated. I feel like you, blah 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 blah. I feel like, and we come up with all of these narratives and stories and ideas and ideals so far removed, so abstracted from the actual sensation of the moment, which is absolutely fundamental for how we relate with each other, for how we show up intimately in the world. And when we look in the biosphere, things are always what they are. Right? Of course, there are species who have all kinds of elaborate ways to hide or abstract or merge with the environment for all kinds of survival purposes. But nevertheless, when we look around, things are exposed. They are exposed to the elements. They are exposed to decay and death. They are exposed. They always what they are. They express what they are in any given moment. And there is a vulnerability in that infinite process of attraction and synergy and decay and entropy. Like all of the elements in the natural world are always open to their own demise, right? Like there is in the attraction and synergy of things constantly erotically being attracted to each other for new life forms to be created. There's a great vulnerability. Things cannot work out. Like two elements can try work and connect into each other, and it's death. Yeah. So there is great vulnerability in it, and we can carry that kind of ecological vulnerability with us as we interact with other people. Yes, there is a great, truly loving beyond the abstraction of love is an incredibly vulnerable act, because we can and will get hurt. And every relationship will end, and this body will die. And like this acknowledgement of continuity and of death, and that is incredibly vulnerable thing, and loving and playing anyway. Things in nature are always open to their decay, and at the same time it doesn't stop them from playing, right? Like it's, I don't know, something that is still being elaborated, but yeah, I think it requires some level of poetic language as well. That's mostly the kind of stuff that I wanted to speak today. There's a bunch of other things like metabolism and things that all kinds of other principles. But this is what I wanted to start with. And I think I spoke enough, and I want to give some space for seeing where all of that is sitting with you guys and what else might we elaborate together. So I'm going to open the space. I'm going to remove the pin. And yeah.
Thank you. I have a question that I wonder, I imagine you've already been thinking about, and I haven't. But so in laying out these general principles that are, observable in ecosystems, right? Whether humans are present or not, but maybe also in human communities, it seems like what we're doing is sort of recognizing patterns that apply despite the diversity of life forms and context niches. And so I'm wondering if you have a vision for how we might, at some point, also recognize what role or relevance there might be to uniquely human ways of doing things, right? So I'm thinking, as a scientist, I study what makes humans potentially unique, like language, art, spirituality, qualities of our way of moving through our experience that we don't see in other animals, or we see sort of building blocks of those human behaviors in other animals, but there's not this full expression that we have. So I'm wondering, I was thinking about this when you were talking about abstraction and how we like create masks and representations of who we think we are, and that gets in the way of sort of our intimacy. And if we might be able at some point, I think it's premature for me, but I don't know for you, to think about, where that unique human capacity for so much abstraction might also be animating and constructive, right? It can be either one, destructive and isolating, or helps us, for instance, to do the work that we're doing here together in community. So, yeah, I'm just curious what thoughts you might have about how each member of the ecosystem, the general principles apply, but they also bring a unique flavor to their interactions.
Mm.
Or do you think that will sort of, that would be disruptive at this stage of thinking, right? Because we're so used to thinking about how special we are and that we're trying to get away from that,
Um, yeah, I'm going to think about it for a little bit. Maybe someone else has some ideas.
Like, for instance, in other conversations, we've talked about art, right? That our creative expression, and that's really nourishing to our humanity and our relationships. So that would be something that is somewhat unique to being a human animal, and yet uh, maybe constructive for imagining these new ways of relating.
It's actually an interesting question because I think it's helpful to elaborate one of these things that we, like the first thing that we spoke about entanglement and diversity and wholeness, like this idea of singularity versus individuality or individuation, in which uniqueness is not something that is fragmented,
Mm-hmm.
something that is part of the relationality. So like even the uniqueness itself is a product of relationality. So there is really, in a sense, nothing that is uniquely separated about us. Like there are plenty, like, I mean, for ones you can say, let's say art, for example, there are plenty of examples of other species expressing things that have no clear evolutionary purpose, that are just for the sake of expression and joy and beauty and aesthetics. But you can also go even farther and more abstract, not more abstracted, farther and more kind of, isn't everything, like the whole process in itself is a playful expression of artistic
Mm.
aliveness, right? And also language. Like there is language everywhere. Everything speaks, everything feels, everything is alive, everything is elaborating stories. Like, so we are unique in many of these things, but not separated in a sense that doesn't exist anywhere else in nature. And I think that's the difference between anthropomorphism that sees human as separated from nature, above nature, because of these particular qualities, and between a more animistic, a more ecological kind of ontology that would say, yes, humans have all of these magnificent, unique qualities, but all of them are a product of its relations with nature.
Mm.
Um, it's not something that puts us elsewhere. It's something that is part of the same process. That's what I would think about. And yeah, I mean, yeah. And then if that's the case, then how are these relationally produced unique qualities come back to the biosphere, right? Like it's not an artist creating an art in the void, or as a kind of something to consume. It is a relational process in which It's producing joy, connectivity, inspiration, muse, whatever. And that art is now inseparable from the relational entanglement that it has. It's not something that stands on its own, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so are we, right? Like what is our role in this web of entangled relationship? And if our art doesn't serve that, then it's just another consumable product. Art is not inherently revolutionary. Science is not inherently revolutionary. You know, they can be, and they can also be in service of the hegemonic powers of extraction and whatever. Maybe that's what's missing, right? Like, where is it meeting the biosphere ecologically again? Like, what is the point, right? Like, I don't know. That's what's coming up for me as you were asking this.
I think that we was it in the ecological the reading group where somebody said that the mind was, you know, of nature, the mind of nature, and all of human expression, everything that comes from the mind is from nature, and maybe the uniquely human quality of that is the ability to reflect on what we're in service to, what um, what what is happening relationally, um, you know, what the effect of our natural expressions.
Yeah. Um, yeah.
What I think is really interesting today and hopeful is the movement of the biologists and the people who are really looking at nature in another way, and finding a philosophy of existence. And I don't really know how to say, but for example, long time ago, this guy, Bruce Lipton, wrote a book, The Biology of Belief, and he completely deconstructed the way we were looking at nature, and from his experiences, he had a kind of epiphany that started a whole new way of seeing life and nature and the different processes. And I do believe today that a lot of people, even in the industry of making things, material for architecture or anything, clothes or whatever, are actually looking at what we call biomimicry, the influence of or the view on how nature creates and how we can be inspired by that, and be more responsible and more effective in our ways of doing things, and also more conscious about the waste. And so I do believe that nature has so much to teach us, and the more we look upon nature and really discover, because there is still so many mysteries about even animal behaviors and courtship in birds, for example, how the ways they use different manners of courting the female, So it's endless, really. And I think we are really at the beginning of this apprenticeship and on collaboration and understanding how the animal kingdom and the plants and everything is collaborating all the time. And so I feel quite hopeful about this movement that we are seeing through a certain kind of science.
Yeah. Yeah, and this movement was always there. It's much less publicized than the kind of fascistic passions who love the theatrical drama of everything. But they are there. And when they say when an idea time has come, it just shows up in everywhere in different places. I think if there is anything that would help us not follow the same footsteps of many other revolutionary attempts that ended up being absorbed and digested by the hegemonic power, is things like that. It's not like a kind of ecological essentialism of coming back to some kind of romantic notion of nature, because that also creates the same fragmentary, human and nature, natural and not natural, chemical, and it's like, but it's rather how all of these things plug together. So science is not separate, like different fields of science are not separated from each other. We realize how anthropology and social sciences and philosophy and physics and astrophysics and ecology and bio, all of these things are inherently entangled and connected, and are not just the privy of specialized academics. They are something that is a lot more open for connectivities. And I think that's, I feel like this is why this is one of the reasons why it's so important in this monumental time of revolutionary kind of passions traversing the social field, is that we have some kind of story, some kind of cohesive story to elaborate that can guide us in some capacity. And that story is not the bureaucratic, institutionalized, hegemonic story, but something that emerges from every thriving biosphere that is all around us. And that could potentially provide some kind of guidance as we go around it. Because I feel like so much of the fragmentary ways in which we see everything also, of course, is how we see the political sphere. This like binarization and rigidification of left right, which misses a lot of the points of what we need and what we want to elaborate. Of course, there is all kinds of revolutionary passions that exist in the fascistic realm. There is a lot of revolutionary oomph that is part of the MAGA movement, for example. And there is also a lot of fascistic passions that exist in the midst of the liberatory spaces. And this is exactly how they are getting stuck all the time and being co-opted again and again historically. Every revolutionary movement, every couple of decades, it just something starts, and there is definitely a fire of excited revolutionary enough in the collective. And then sometimes the very either the establishment of like the party, the state, all of these kind of hegemonic forces, or even sometimes the revolutionary forces themselves, and then it fizzles. And it's like what happens in Russia, what happens in this around the 60s, 70s, where it just keeps happening all the time. And I've yet to be seen any of these revolutions guided by post-human, post-anthropomorphism, emergent ecological principles. And part of doing so is that we don't have a script. There's nothing to fall back to. There's no like 1, 2, 3, 4 how to do it. It's just like nature. There is emergence, there is spontaneity, there is I don't know. Yeah. And of course, there is the beautiful applicability of all of this in our personal lives that I love. You know, that's very immediate kind of how to be a creature in this happening. And then you go back to this and you're like, oh, wow. Here's a way to deal with the relational drama that is in my life right now, with my emotional challenges, with the ways that I'm experiencing this life, with the immediate sensory experience that I'm faced with. Here's a beautiful way to deal with my grief and my fear of death and my general anxieties about different things. Like, oh.
So would you believe that if you don't consider that we can apply a kind of discipline, should it be replaced by ethics? Because when you, okay, if we consider there is an emergence, kind of organic, we let ourselves as a community be organic. But in this organic process or development, of course, there can be also entanglements of desires that contradict each other, or kind of egos. So how do we prevent conflicts? Is it by reflecting on ethics and the values, like you are doing now in a way? But as you said, I mean, so many revolutions that started with such great intention collapsed or were crushed. And so letting things be, I understand how you can, let things go their own natural way, but at the same time, as we are humans and full of emotions, and I don't know, it's a question I'm asking myself, is how to evolve and create together in a peaceful way, so that anybody can find hold their space.
I don't believe that peace is an ecological principle. I think that conflict, in fact, is the norm. And ethics is the kind of relational output that is produced by these conflicts of interest, conflicts of movements, like in the thriving biosphere itself, things have their own unique desire for life, right? Like, and it's through that antagonism sometimes that, collaboration is not antithesis to antagonism or to conflict. It's not like and I think this is specifically, if we are talking about the kind of the revolutionary movement of the 60s, especially in the United States, it was very much revolved around this like peaceful, kumbaya, psychedelic kind of this naivete. I don't think we can avoid conflict. I don't think we want to. Conflict is how life is being produced. The tension of things coming together, attracted into each other, supernova exploding, creating livable planets. You know what I mean? Like, I was talking the other day with friends about this very topic, and we were meandering and imagining future utopias, and told me like, how would I collaborate with someone who is I don't know, racist next to me? And I was like, You don't have to be their best friends, but if I'm thinking about community, I'm not thinking in a kumbaya, we're all getting along together. I'm thinking about me collaborating with my racist neighbor, I mean, like, okay, you think that is the case, as long as you're not harming anybody. And if so, I'm going to come with all of my friends and the rest of the community, and we're going to stop it. But otherwise, think whatever you want. Can we grow food together? Can we collect water together so we can sustain life? You know what I mean? Like, it's not about agreements in constant agreement. It's about collaborating with the people around us. I think there is a big movement right now. The word community is almost overused, right? Like community. Everything is about community. But we are looking for community elsewhere. I'm going to move there so I can have a better community. I'm going to go there. We're still talking at that in anthropomorphic ways. Community is humans. No, it's more than humans. But community is also here. Like all of the people who live right next to you right now, this is your community right now, right? And all of the other non-human creatures as well. Have you checked up on them? Have you asked them what do they need? Have you figured out ways in which you can collaborate and meet each other's needs in ways that are independent from systems of hegemony? That exists. You know what I mean? Like, that's what's so heartbreaking in the polarization of and the kind of theatrical insanity of the political system in the United States, especially, but generally in the world. It's like people see each other and they see an enemy. And sometimes I don't blame them, right? Like, it's a person who stayed silent about a genocide or wanted to, like, voted for a person who takes their right. But at the end of the day, like, we are all products of the same system. We are, like, even when I look at billionaires, I don't see evil people in an inherent way. I see people who are the image of a person, but inside it's completely vacant and there is just the desires of capital. Peter Thiel thinks that he is a genius. It's some fucking far-reaching philosophy about the end of democracy and why democracy doesn't work. He thinks that he's a genius, but he's a miserable person. He doesn't have any desires, any original ecological biospheric desires of his own. He's completely filled with capital, what capital wants. It's usually people who are very miserable without any kind of relational thriving in their life, without real intimacy or love, entirely afraid of death in pathological ways, trying to extend their life forever and so on and so forth. And I think the same way about like the Joe Schmo, or not in the same way, but in a similar way, the Joe Schmo who chose to like got passionate about the fascistic, movements of the time, right? That's how these hegemonic systems work. They take our desire and they direct it towards itself. They make desire want its own oppression. And when we ask ourselves, what is community? We don't like, oh, how can we make peace with these people? No. If I'm going to see a Nazi, I'm going to maybe punch him in the face, but I'm also going to be like, hey, if those are my neighbors, what are the necessities, right? Like, can we collect water and purify them? Can we grow food together? Can we, I don't know. I think it's a bit controversial to say all of these things in this kind of landscape, but I think it's important. Like, sooner or later, we are not going to be able to live as individuals anymore. So what do we do then? And so coming back to this conflict, this is what it made me think about. It's like someone told me the other day that I'm an obstacle for peace. And I took it as a compliment, I am an obstacle for peace. Show me a place in the biosphere that there is peace, right? Like where?
I think maybe that process you're talking about, you see a Nazi, punch him in the face, but if he needs water and you're in the same community, you help get water together.
Yeah.
Like acts like that over time would have the ability and the power to then make that original conflict of ideas and morals like kind of less pertinent, because the community itself is building through just like the basic necessities, simple necessities of life. And I think that's a pretty cool perspective that I'm gonna ponder more, because yeah, there's like this idea of like enemies and this like divisiveness, but cool, you can have a conflict and say, hey, I don't believe what you're talking about, it's a bunch of baloney, but hey, we're in the same neighborhood, let's watch out for our ecological surroundings and et cetera, et cetera. And then through that, like those divisive ideas become less and less, maybe, I don't know.
They just don't have anything to hold on to, right? Like people are so like the only reason these theatrics work is because people are so detached from the material necessities of their realities that there is nothing else but living in the realm of ideas and abstraction. So like the very kind of inherent needs that we have for community, for connection, for intimacy, they are being fed by these realms of abstract ideas, right? So now I have a whole identity that revolves around this particular belief system that I have. And through that, I feel connection because I feel connected to all of the other people who believe like me and think like me. And this is something that makes a lot of sense. We all have those needs, but we also have to like be very critical about our own thinking and ask ourselves like, okay, what I'm like, do we want to eradicate Zionism as an idea? Yes. Do we want to eradicate Zionists? Yeah, we want to, as a community, right? Or any community, small or big, people who've harmed the community, we need to have things in place as our ancestor had to, learn to deal with that. There have been tribal communities when someone hurt another person, or even murdered or did things like that. There were like systems in place of what to do with it, right? And it's something that is, like you said, ethics. It's a relational thing. It's not morality that is like some kind of pre-existing imposed thing. It's something that is emerged relationally. But yeah, it's not easy to break the script because you go outside of the familiar script and you are in uncharted waters. You're like, oh, well, what do we do? Well, we'll see, like we'll figure it out. We will need to find ways. Yeah.
But isn't it linked deeply to the question of identity? What is my identity? And mostly people, I mean, it's much easier for people to refer to an identity linked with their religion, appartenance, country, patriotism, and what I feel you're talking about a lot is like that our true sense of identity stands elsewhere or belongs elsewhere.
It's both. It's that, and it's also the very deconstruction of the whole notion of identity as individualism or individuated, separated thing. Like a creature in the biosphere has a uniqueness, but in no way, shape, or form separated from the rest of the biosphere, from the rest of the social sphere. Our kind of the identities that we are talking about here, like I'm a leftist, I'm a liberal, I'm a this, I'm a that, I am a teacher, or like based on our work or whatever, like I am the self. That identity is individuated. It's a momentary rigidification of a process, of a movement, and it's like capturing it and holding on to it and making it stratifying it. Singularity is quite a different thing, right? Like you can teach as a verb, but you are not a teacher, right? Like you can uphold values that are associated with leftist kind of spheres, but you are not a leftist. And I think that rigidification of identity as an individuated, separated thing, that's the kind of fragmentation that happens when we are disconnected from our belonging to the biosphere. And then it's like there is no ground to stand on. And so we are grasping to these things. Like I need some belonging in something, you know. I need a sky daddy to tell me what to do. I need mom and dad to tell me what to do. And then the mom and dad becomes the partner. Now I'm looking for mommy and daddy in intimate relationships. And then I'm on my job. Like it's all of these things that become nouns that are otherwise verbs and processes, movements, actions, right? Yeah. I love this.
One of the domains where I see a lot of these principles play out in my own life is in our relationship to time. So you talked about that sort of when specifically when you were contrasting, seasonality or rhythms, right, versus linearity. But I see it, the intersections between some of the other principles, right? Like, so we live with these timekeeping devices in our pockets or on our wrists that, like, I think give us a false sense of control over what is unfolding in our experience and like reinforce rigid thinking because it sort of squelches that movement towards spontaneity or adapting to the moment. And yet I don't necessarily maybe have the connection yet to how this plays out in larger scale, like liberatory movements, but I see it in my personal and professional life. Like when we're trying to imagine how might we live by these principles, like, how, like when I wake up in the morning, I know the things that need to happen and I don't look at the clock. I just move through the things. But that makes it difficult for me to arrive at a certain time at a certain place, right? So there's when it hits social coordination, right? If other people are living by minutes and hours and I'm living by mornings, afternoons, and evenings. And so one thing I'm trying to experiment with is like, well, you can make plans, but they have to, that are kept in minutes and hours, but they should be flexible and adaptive, like holding them lightly, just like we have plans for our life, but death might come, you know? And so I find it a really rich space to every day I'm thinking about looking at my notes and thinking about like how these principles are engaged in how I relate to time. And when I capitulate to the capitalist framework that everything has to be measured and produced versus whatever the rhythms are in my body or what modeling I'm giving for my children, right? If I want them to have a concept of lateness versus it takes as long as it takes because it's an unfolding, right? So anyway, I would love anybody's thoughts about their relationships to time because I really have a lot of conflict there, but I think there's a lot of potential as well to move differently.
I feel I've spoken a lot today, so
Maybe you guys don't struggle with time the way I do.
I can feel what you're saying and relate to it. I guess I'm still in a space where I haven't found where that's realistic for me to like I've lived in environments and communities where that was definitely possible. And I'm not saying it's not possible in this society, but like it was in harmony and it flowed because other people were living like that. But now that I don't live in that space, I find it's a balance. I'm like you. I wake up whatever time, I don't think about it, and I do the things I have to do, but I do have so many commitments that do start at a time. So I don't have any answers. I just wanted to share that I think about time as well, but I'm not sure how to navigate it in our current reality.
I think it works when you're living in a space where everyone kind of has that flexibility, but to me, I have to keep those certain times out of respect for other people's time that are living in a similar balanced reality of having these certain engagements or commitments. So it's a tough balance, and I don't know the answer either because, I know some people are like, "Oh, I got busy, sorry, I'm late." Well, I could have kept doing what was in my rhythm, but you know what I mean? So it's a give and a take. It's a two-way street. If both parties or parties that you're doing this time-oriented stuff with have that flexibility, then it works. But then I get in this mindset where I'm disrespecting someone's time because I'm late and because I had my own rhythm, and now they're out of their rhythm because they showed up to a certain place, So it's a difficult balance for sure.
Maybe we can think about it less in terms of um, essence or more in terms of function. So I don't know if it's like going beyond the linear sense of time is about like um throwing away the clock and not using the socially accepted whatever, but rather about what kind of sense, what kind of realities are produced by the way that we use time. So for example, if like for me, for example, I'm always on time. I'm trying to be late sometimes because I live in Mexico and everybody arrived like 2.5 hours late, and that's like the time. But I can't. I can't. Like I just show up 10 minutes before. So if I would take that experience and I would use that to produce anxiety for myself or others, oh, like why are you late? And then I'm using the kind of chronos linear motion of time to produce some kind of reality that I don't particularly like. You know what I mean? So like it's a more what kind of use does my use of time has? And then
That's
like of course, yeah.
sorry.
There we go.
These have been my thoughts the whole time in this conversation, concepts of time and discipline and identity, not inherently bad things that we should like try to rid ourselves of, but just a deeper analysis of like what are these concepts in service to when we express them or feel attachment to them.
Yeah. Yeah, we are so used to this dichotomic binarization of everything. We're like, oh, now that we're elaborating on ecological principles, this is because all of the rest is bad. Like, but that's exactly what we're kind of going beyond. Yeah, there is a reason why so many of the kind of wisdom traditions and philosophical lineages everywhere have been very focused on ontologies of time, right? From the Stoics, who elaborated, the difference between chronos, the linear motion of time going from past to present to future, to ions, which is like a never-ending presence that is everything is always just happen and about to happen. um, um, and I think all of these things can be integrated into the way that we are like we can understand that time is a completely illusory concept, and still it's here. We are using it. Like we can understand that the social construct is completely made up and arbitrary, but we are here. Like it's happening. It's real. Like people say, does Israel have a right to exist? It exists. Who cares? Like let's talk about it. You know what I mean? Like time is here in the sense that we use it. Now, what can we do about it? What kind of creative elaborations and all kinds of playful ways we can use time, our experience in time, on time, with time, as time? What can we do with that, And I think that's a lot more interesting than like, now trying to be like, okay, now I'm not going to use the clock or any of the principles that we elaborated today, right? Like in a negating way. No, we're here to affirm, to create, to invite new ways to express, to experience, to live, to love, to die. Yeah. Like I don't care when people are late because I structured my life in a way that I'm not in a hurry. So if someone is not coming in the same time, I'm going to open a book and I'm going to read something and stare at the sky, like, and those experiences can happen inside of the rest of the happening. Yeah. Anyone has some thoughts about some of the other principles we elaborated today? Hey, Franco, good to see you, man.
Hey, I just want to quickly elaborate on time because I feel like what I'm experiencing right now perfectly illustrates some of this. But I have a newborn here. I have a baby girl who's jumping all over me. I tried to make this meeting in time, but could not. And, that's okay. I tried to do what I could. But it's interesting once you start having to live with unpredictable little creatures, everything changes. So I have to let go of the standard sense of time in order to continue moving through life. So I just wanted to note that because it's interesting how it's like literally shifting as we're talking about this.
Yeah.
Franco, I can really relate to that having two children. And I think that like we all probably have experiences of being put into contexts where, time is being related to differently, right? And then we can recognize the assumptions that we are bringing. Like my first experience of that I was conscious of maybe was when I lived for a bit in West Africa, where the use of time seemed so inefficient to my Western way. And then I realized like, oh, it has a lot of spaciousness that I have never experienced before, like you're talking about in Mexico. And our kids do that too, right? They're so unpredictable and all of their wants are expressed like needs, and then you can see like, oh, is there actually spaciousness here where I didn't think there was, right? Because I was better able to live by minutes and hours before I had children, but they have rhythms, right? Babies have rhythms. They need to eat and sleep. And actually there's some predictability to the rhythms, right? Or to the cycles. And I think this is pointing to me, like your comment, to also listening to our bodies. We didn't talk specifically today about embodiment, but that there's so much information in our bodies that we tend to ignore in our culture. We live in this abstract, disembodied way, but like we have inherent rhythms to govern us about hunger, sleep, thirst, intimacy, space, right? And connecting with those personal rhythms, I think, is one way to kind of move with more spaciousness, if that makes sense. I'm not sure if that's the right word, but I'm moving towards that in my head.
There are also some fountains of wisdom, as we call them, but also like resources, because resources is so extractive, right? resources. Go read those books. Suck them dry. So fountains of wisdom, they just keep happening. That are very relevant here. I'm gonna also post them in the appropriate place in Discord. I feel like I haven't quite seen and like a book or one place that is elaborating these kind of emergent ecological principles in this way that we are doing here. If you guys know some, please point me towards. But for me, it's a journey of like collecting it from a lot of different places. So there's just like a few that came to mind that I think is would be good to explore. So first of all, Robin Wall Kimmerer, Braiding Sweetgrass, Gathering Moss, The Serviceberry, magnificent books that are all like very specifically decolonial and kind of like indigenous wisdom rooted, specifically indigenous people of her tribe, which I don't remember the name of. Elaborating a lot of these very principles as we spoke about. One that is not as known, but I've had personal conversations with and I've interviewed on the Emergent Wisdom podcast at some point. Andreas Weber is a Berlin-based biologist, philosopher, who wrote especially two books that I read, at least, The Biology of Wonder and Matter and Desire. And he has a very beautifully poetic, scientifically rooted way to kind of elaborate a lot of these principles in very succinct ways. And I really love how he thinks. And of course, there is Maury Bookchin, which we are working together through his book, The Ecology of Freedom. He's very focused specifically on the kind of deconstruction of hierarchy and domination. But in the process, there is a lot of kind of emergent principles elaborated. If you guys have any other resources, thinkers, I think you, Marine, mentioned someone earlier, so maybe we can all put it together after the session in the Discords in resources. That would be really helpful. Yeah. Anything else that comes to mind in regarding to the principles we've elaborated today? I feel like there is a lot more to dive deeper into each one of these. Maybe it could be a good idea also if I'll post in the chat, in the Food Forest chat, what we went through, and then invite some prompts like to engage with them and kind of start thinking through them. I think that would be cool throughout the next couple of weeks. Amazing. How are we feeling? Do we have a sense of culmination for today, or something that wants to be expressed yet?
I feel like I kept saying, what are our concepts in service to, and identifying some categories of just things that you could be serving in your expressions. And the categories that jump out to me are capital and relationship. What is it? What is identity and time and discipline? I feel like it might be superfluous to point out that these have been so well co-opted to the point of like destroying the planet and genocide and everything, when the goal is capital gain, and when the goal is relationship, there's a resistance to that, because people live in poverty or whatever. I don't know. But that we're running out of time to have many choices.
You mean running out of time here or in general?
In general on the planet.
What an interesting expression. Running out of time. Right? Like just think about the kind of the assumptions and the premises and the kind of ontologies that are just
You're right.
we are running outside of time, which we usually say when we say like something is ending, but if we are going outside of time, then we are not in a hurry, right? Like it's gone. Like we're running out of time. Then it's fine. We have all the everything. We're beyond time, right? Like language is so peculiar. All right. Thank you, everybody, for your contribution and presence today. Let's keep the conversation going. Let's maybe contemplate and think this through the next couple of weeks. And maybe the prompt for the bonfire will be like, okay, what are some of these ecological principles and where do we see them in our own lives? What do we kind of keep elaborating them on an embodied way for you, Eileen? And yeah, thank you for being here. If anybody wants to support me on Patreon, you're welcome to do so. That's very helpful for me to be able to do that sustainably. Thank you for everybody who does so already. Yeah, can't wait to continue the conversation on Discord.